I had worked at the store for nearly 4 years, but that night felt different. Perhaps it was the weather. Heavy rain had started pouring after sunset. Or maybe it was the exhaustion that comes with working late. Whatever the reason, something felt off, as if the air carried a strange tension. I glanced at the clock. 11:45 p.m. Just 15 minutes until the end of my shift, and I could finally head home. I was already counting down the seconds in my mind. A customer approached the register, the last one of the night. He was a man in his late 30s, average height, wearing a tattered jacket and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. He carried a plastic bag with just 2 items, a bottle of soda and a pack of gum. His face seemed familiar, but I couldn't place where I'd seen him before. "How's it going?" I said, trying to sound friendly despite my fatigue. He gave a half smile and avoided eye contact. "Good, just the soda and gum." I scanned the items, attempting to keep the small talk going to pass the time. "Shopping late, huh? Busy day?" He nodded, his fingers tapping nervously on the counter. "Yeah, you could say that." I finished the transaction and handed him the receipt. "That'll be $8.45. Have a good night." But instead of leaving, he hesitated, glancing around the empty store. "Do you ever feel like you're being watched?" I raised an eyebrow, unsure where this conversation was headed. "Watched?" "Yeah, like someone's always watching you, even when you can't see them." His dark, almost empty eyes met mine. I let out a nervous laugh. "Not really. Maybe it's just the night shift messing with your mind." He didn't laugh. Instead, he stared at me longer than was comfortable, then said in a barely audible voice, "I've seen things. Things that shouldn't be here." A chill ran down my spine, but I tried to brush it off. "Well, it's late. You should probably head out." He nodded slowly but didn't move. Then suddenly he leaned in, his breath reeking of stale cigarettes, and whispered, "You're locking the doors, right?" I blinked in confusion. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer. Instead, he picked up his items, turned toward the exit, and walked away. As he reached the door, he stopped, glanced back, and said, "Make sure you lock them tight." I watched him leave, the chime of the doorbell echoing in the silent store. There was something unsettling about the way he said it. After he was gone, I locked the door behind him, double-checked the latch, and slid the heavy chain across. But even as I returned to my station, I couldn't shake the strange feeling lingering in the air. The store had been empty for a while now, but the silence felt unnatural. It was as if the stillness itself was watching me. I tried to dismiss the thought. It was just the end of a long day. I told myself it was just fatigue. But then I heard it. A faint rustling sound, like someone walking deep within the store. I froze, holding my breath. There wasn't supposed to be anyone here. I had locked the doors, and yet, there he was, standing just outside the glass. His face was still hidden beneath the shadow of his cap, but his eyes, those eyes were fixed on mine. I couldn't move. His gaze was intense, almost magnetic, as if he wanted to keep me rooted in place. The door handle twisted suddenly. I jumped back in shock. The man was trying to get in. Panicking, I sprinted toward the back exit, my heart pounding in my chest. My hands trembled as I fumbled with the keys. After several tries, I finally managed to unlock the door. I bolted into the alley behind the store, gasping for air, and didn't dare look back. The next morning I returned to work, still shaken by the events of the previous night. The manager barely acknowledged me as I clocked in. That's when I noticed something odd. The security camera footage from the night before was missing. Hours of recordings had been wiped. The footage of the last customer, gone. I asked the manager about it, but he just shrugged. "Sometimes the system glitches, don't worry about it." But I knew there was more to it. I knew what I had seen. As my night shift progressed, I couldn't stop replaying the man's words in my head. "Make sure you lock them tight." I wondered, had I locked the doors tightly enough? That morning, I woke with a lingering sense of dread. The events of the night played over and over in my mind, like a broken tape. The feeling of being watched, the man's cryptic warning, the missing footage. None of it made sense, but it all felt disturbingly real. As I prepared for my next shift, I couldn't shake the haunting feeling that something or someone was still watching me.
It was a regular night shift at the Walmart Center in Birmingham, Alabama. The last customers were wandering the aisles, finishing up their shopping as the clock edged closer to 3 a.m., the official closing time. As the closing manager, I was following the usual routine, ensuring the self-checkout machines were running smoothly, supervising employees as they wrapped up their tasks, and making sure no one was lingering in the aisles. The night was supposed to be as uneventful as any other. I strolled through the aisles, my footsteps echoing in the silent store, the harsh fluorescent lights above, buzzing faintly and flickering occasionally. I saw Mary, one of the night staff, restocking items in aisle 5. Jason was at the front, overseeing the self-checkout lanes. There was a strange heaviness in the air, a tension I couldn't quite explain. It wasn't the usual fatigue or the solitude that comes with a night shift. It was something different. Maybe it was the eerie silence in the empty aisles, or the fact that no customers had ventured into the back half of the store for over an hour. At 4:15 a.m., an elderly man approached the self-checkout machines. He was wearing a worn-out brown coat that looked decades old. His hair was unkempt, his face pale, and his eyes clouded as if he hadn't slept in days. He shuffled toward one of the self-checkout stations, clutching a shopping basket. Inside was a single item, a small black box, smooth and devoid of any label or barcode. When he attempted to scan the box, the machine wouldn't register it. I approached and asked, "Can I help you with that, sir?" He didn't respond immediately, just stared blankly at the screen in front of him. Then, in a hoarse whisper, he said, "It doesn't work." "Let me override it for you," I offered, stepping closer to the machine. But before I could, he interrupted with a dry, almost chilling voice. "It's not for you." I froze, an icy sensation creeping through me. The man turned and walked toward the exit without another word. He didn't even glance back as the automatic doors slid open for him. I stood there, holding the black box he had left behind, unable to shake the sense of dread settling over me. The box was cold to the touch, its surface smooth and featureless. No barcode, no branding, just an unnerving void. Curiosity got the better of me. I decided to open it. Inside was an old photograph, its edges worn and tinged with a bluish hue from age. My heart raced as I carefully lifted it out. The black and white image depicted a group of people standing in what appeared to be aisle 4. Their faces were all blurred, as though deliberately smudged, except for one figure in the background. He was perfectly clear, his coat, his posture, and his hollow stare. It was the same man who had just walked out of the store. My throat went dry. How was this possible? The store had been built in 1995, yet this photograph looked far older. How could this man have been captured in a picture taken before the store even existed?
In a small town in Ohio, there was a Walmart store. At first glance, it seemed like any other ordinary store, but this particular Walmart carried a strange reputation among the locals. Everyone talked about its eerie atmosphere, which gave visitors an uncomfortable feeling, as if the building hid something mysterious behind its walls. The glass facade, which once reflected sunlight, was now perpetually dim, as though it refused to let sunlight in. The employees noticed this too and began avoiding discussions about the creeping fear they felt during night shifts. Rumors spread rapidly among the townspeople, especially after a series of bizarre incidents. Unexplained footsteps in empty aisles, toys moving on their own in the toy section, and sudden drops in temperature. But what began as mere whispers turned into a terrifying reality when employees started disappearing during their night shifts. Amelia was a young, pragmatic girl who had been working at the store for a few months. Despite the circulating rumors, she didn't believe in superstitions. However, when her colleagues warned her about the dangers of the night shifts, her curiosity was piqued. When she asked why, the only response she received was, "Beware of the shadows." One dark night, Amelia was organizing shelves in the toy section when she heard the faint laughter of a child behind her. She turned around to find the area completely empty. Ignoring it as her imagination, she continued working, but the laughter grew closer and louder. Suddenly, she felt an intense chill in the air, as though unseen eyes were watching her. She tried to finish her task quickly, but the power went out, plunging the store into darkness. Amelia illuminated the space with her phone's flashlight, but froze in terror when she noticed the toys moving slowly. Their hollow eyes were fixed on her, as if watching her every move. Desperately trying to escape, she found the doors tightly locked. Strange whispers began to fill the air, calling her name repeatedly. Amelia! Amelia! The voices grew louder and more terrifying with every passing moment. At the end of the aisle, Amelia noticed a large mirror. As she approached it, she saw the reflection of a little girl standing directly behind her. The girl wore a dirty white dress. Her face twisted into a wicked smile, and her lifeless black eyes stared back at Amelia. In a voice barely louder than a whisper, the girl said, "Our game isn't over yet." Amelia tried to scream, but no sound came out. She felt a cold hand grab her arm tightly, pulling her into the darkness. The next morning, when the store's power was restored, employees found Amelia sitting in a corner of the store. Her eyes were vacant, and she kept muttering in a trembling voice, "They're here. They're here." Amelia could never explain what happened that night. Her mental state deteriorated rapidly, and she never returned to work. Following the incident, the store's management decided to shut it down permanently. Yet the townspeople claim they still hear laughter and whispers coming from inside the building at night. It is said that the spirit of the sinister little girl still haunts the store, searching for her next victim to join her in her deadly game.
In a small town in Missouri, there was an old 24-hour store. While it seemed ordinary during the day, something strange happened at night. Employees avoided working after midnight, except in urgent situations. Rumors spread that something evil haunted the place. One night, a new employee named Jack agreed to work the night shift due to his need for money. It was his first night on the shift, and his colleague Mike was working with him. "Why is it so quiet here? I thought the store would be busier at night," Jack said, laughing lightly. "Trust me, you'll wish the quiet lasts all night," Mike replied. "What do you mean? Is this some kind of joke?" Jack asked. Mike lowered his voice. "Listen, Jack, something strange happens here after midnight. Maybe it's just superstition, but I've seen things that make me believe." Smirking. "Like what? Dolls moving? Ghosts suddenly appearing?" Jack teased. "Mike, not exactly, but things that can't be explained. Like doors opening and closing by themselves, and sometimes you hear footsteps, like someone's walking down the aisles, but there's no one there." Jack shakes his head. "Sounds like stories people tell to make the night shift more interesting." As Jack and Mike were talking, the power suddenly went out, plunging the store into complete darkness. Mike pulled a small flashlight from his pocket and illuminated the space. "Well, that's strange. Does this happen often?" Jack asked. "No, but it's rarely just a regular power outage. Come with me to the control room. I'll try to restore the power," Mike said. The two began walking through the aisles. The place was completely silent, except for the sound of their footsteps and a faint whisper-like sound, stopping suddenly. "Wait, did you hear that?" Jack asked, acting unconcerned. "Don't start imagining things, Jack. This place has a way of messing with your mind," Mike replied. "No, I'm serious. I heard something. It was like someone was calling my name," Jack insisted, sighing. "All right, let's keep going. Don't stop. The key is not to show you're scared," Mike said. When they reached the control room, they found the door slightly ajar, even though it had been closed when they left. "This isn't possible." "Who opened the door?" Jack asked, swallowing. "I'm not sure. Just be careful," Mike warned. They entered the room, but instead of finding the control panel, they found a blood-written message on the wall. "Don't come closer." Trembling, "Mike, what is this? Who did this?" Jack asked, stepping back. "I don't know, but we need to get out now," Mike said. Suddenly, the door slammed shut, and the whispering sound grew louder. Shadows began to appear in the corner, moving toward them, screaming. "Open the door! Get us out of here!" Jack yelled. Mike, struggling to open the door. "I'm trying. Keep banging on the door." Suddenly, the whispers stopped, and the place was filled with a terrifying silence. Then, a pale woman's face appeared behind Jack in the glass, her eyes entirely black. The woman, echoing voice, "You don't belong here." Jack turned and saw her, screaming loudly. But before he could move, everything went dark again. When the power was restored in the morning, Mike was found sitting in the parking lot, trembling and unable to speak. Jack, however, was never found. The store remained closed for several days, and when it reopened, no one dared to work the night shifts again. However, customers continued to report seeing strange shadows and hearing whispering sounds coming from the empty aisles.
I never imagined that a quick trip to the grocery store could turn into my worst nightmare. The plan was simple: buy a few things for dinner and head home. It was an ordinary evening with the sun beginning to set and the parking lot half empty, with a few people coming and going. But you know that strange feeling like something's just not right. Maybe I should have listened to it and left, but I went ahead without imagining what was waiting for me. When I parked the car, I took one last look at my phone, turned off the engine, and got ready to step out. That's when I noticed a man standing just a few meters away, staring at me directly. He was next to an old car that looked like it could fall apart any moment. He was staring at me in a strange way, as if expecting something, which made me feel uneasy. But I pretended not to notice and continued walking toward the store entrance. Before I reached the door, I heard a voice calling my name. I turned around and saw that it was the same man, waving at me, motioning for me to come back. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what he wanted, but I felt I should at least hear what he had to say. He seemed to need help. Despite the bad feeling, I walked back to him, keeping a safe distance. He started talking about problems with his car engine, claiming he didn't know what to do and needed a second opinion. As he spoke, I noticed his tone felt off. He was pretending to be calm, but there was something about his manner that sent a chill down my spine. I politely apologized, told him I didn't know much about cars, and suggested he call a tow truck, but he insisted, saying it wouldn't hurt to take a quick look. When I refused again, he looked frustrated for a moment, but quickly forced a smile. Then, suddenly, he exaggeratedly opened his car door, motioning for me to get in. That's when I felt real danger. I immediately backed away, telling him I couldn't help. His facial expression changed as if a mask had fallen for a moment, revealing something I didn't want to see. He took a step closer to me and suddenly grabbed my arm. I felt a strong grip, and he started pulling me toward his car. I fought with all my strength, and finally I managed to break free. I ran toward the store, my heart pounding with fear. As soon as I entered, I shakily called the police and told them what had happened. They arrived shortly after, but the man and his car were gone. Even though time has passed, the memory still haunts me, especially when I'm in public places. The thought of what could have happened if I had responded to him constantly worries me, and I think that's the scariest part of it all.
In the bustling Walmart store, Nicole stood behind the register, busy with her usual tasks. The beeping of the registers and the chatter of customers filled the air. Beside her, Maven was arranging products on the shelves, while David was bringing in boxes of new merchandise. Nicole approached Maven after finishing with a complaining customer and said, "Maven, have you noticed anything strange lately? It feels like the atmosphere here has become heavier, like something is watching us." Maven looked up from the stacked boxes and smiled lightly. "Oh, Nicole, you're probably just tired. This place is always crowded and noisy. It's normal to feel stressed." But Nicole didn't seem convinced. "No, it's not just the work pressure. Last night, when I was closing the store, I heard footsteps behind me. When I turned around, there was no one there." David, having finished moving the boxes, came closer to them. Footsteps? In this store? It's so big and old, any noise could be from the wind or the pipes. But if you ask me, it's just your imagination. Nicole hesitated for a moment, then said, "Maybe. But there's something else. That old lady who comes in almost every night before closing. Have you noticed she never buys anything? She just wanders the aisles and then disappears." Maven and David exchanged looks. Maven responded teasingly, "Maybe she's a ghost looking for a good deal." David laughed, but said in a serious tone, "Actually, I've seen her. Only once, but she felt strange. She looked at me like she knew me from years ago." The three of them fell silent for a moment. Then Maven shook her head and said, "Well, maybe we should stop thinking about these things. Let's get back to work." But Nicole couldn't shake off the unsettling feeling that lingered. As the hours passed, the strange occurrences increased. The store lights flickered repeatedly, and strange sounds echoed from the empty aisles. Nicole felt that things wouldn't stay normal for much longer.